And this is the cool thing about this night. Ramy and I have known each other now for about 19 years, and 18 years ago, Ramy was one of the first speakers he was one of the first speakers at the first meeting of the Los Angeles Final Cut Pro user group. And yeah, so we've known each other for that long. So it was Digital Film Tree back then that took the plunge into Final Cut Pro. They also put the Pro into Final Cut Pro with Film Logic. They were the ones who taught Walter Murch how to use Final Cut Pro on Cold Mountain. And now they have taken kind of a circular route, and now they're using Resolve. So these guys like cutting edge stuff, and they like taking chances and jumping off the cliff. And that's what tonight is all about, is jumping off the cliff and telling you guys if it's okay to jump off that cliff. So please welcome the CEO from Digital Film Tree, the guy who loves to jump off cliffs, Ramy Katrib.
I love you, Michael.
I love you too.
So we still drink together after all these years. We've been in hotel rooms together. We've been in small European hotel rooms, which are super cramped, and really experienced each other's essence. With I think 3 other guys too. So this was in our heyday. So my name is Ramy Katrib. I'm really happy to be here tonight. This is actually a distinct pleasure because I love the Final Cut Pro, the Los Angeles Final Cut Pro Users Group. It's amazing. Ever since Michael changed the name, however, sometime around Final Cut 7 and 10, I still have a hard time remembering what this user group is called. Does anybody, what is it?
Los Angeles
Creative Pro Users Group. So I've had a hard time retaining that because to me, it always will be the LA Final Cut Pro Users Group. In many ways, I started my business here 18 years and 2 months ago at the first ever LA Final Cut Pro Users Group meeting. And I call it Michael Horton's User Group because it's been distinctly Michael all these years. And Michael back then jumped off a cliff. He used to be a distinguished, established actor, and he pivoted to this creative technology space, and I think has done the best job of anyone in terms of running a community. So at that first user group meeting, I presented this idea of using a desktop computer, specifically the blue and white Mac G3, with the first ever consumer implementation of FireWire, and leveraging 2 pieces of software I had just heard about, which were called Final Cut Pro and Film Logic. And the whole idea there was to edit film digitally. From day one, that idea was validated by this community, and the rest has been history. Those ideas are what keep us relevant today, even though it was 18 years ago. It's hard to believe, but it's very true. So we work on a lot of different projects. We were born as a file-based company, then we evolved into a remote post-services company. And then over 5 years ago, we became a software development company. And practically speaking, we become an IT logistics company, helping connect different productions to the internet, which is, to me, my definition of what the future of production and post looks like. It's simply connected to the internet, so we can do more things than before. We get to work on cool projects like Roseanne, and before you know it, they're gone. Right? Later tonight, after the break, we'll be joined by Thomas Galen, Jacob Tillman, Joe Suzuki, and Dan Judy. And I know I got that wrong, right? We've known each other for a long time. So they're going to be demonstrating right here on stage the Resolve workflow from dailies to delivery. And for better or for worse, we're going to give it a shot right here on stage. So, DaVinci has been part of my life for 25 years. That's half my life. I've been involved with this company, with this application. I'm going to attempt to discuss how DaVinci was part of our history and also how it's used today at Digital Film Tree to do all the work we do across all departments. I'll even endeavor to coherently commingle history and the future of post because I think they're very connected. So let's start with the golden age of TV. So years ago, a lot of critics said that the explosion of TV is not sustainable, right? Humanity cannot watch that much television. So it turns out those people were wrong, right? And a lot of people bet the farm that this is not sustainable. For some reason it is, and it's still going on. In fact, now companies like Netflix will produce a show in Portugal, and for some reason, a ton of people in South Korea are watching it. So this is a new dynamic. It's a long-tail dynamic, right? If I produce something and I put it out there, someone will find it eventually or right away. And that model is actually proving out to be a cultural phenomenon. Speaking of Netflix, I've recently heard them being called the machine, right? You have a situation now where one company is producing, someone read the last comment. So you have one company that essentially now produces more content than every studio combined by a long shot. That's kind of crazy, right? And that only happened recently. In fact, Digital Film Tree posted Netflix's first ever original content, but that was like 7, 8 years ago when they were making comedy specials, like the Kings of Comedy. And that effort failed, and they quit, they stopped. And now they've come back with a vengeance, to say the least. So this is my romantic and realistic view of binge watching, right? This graphic makes me feel old because it's been scientifically proven that if you're younger, you tend to binge watch, you dig that, you do that, and if you're older, you tend to watch episodes one at a time, you know, like normal people. And I actually find myself like right in the middle. I enjoy watching episodes one at a time, and then every once in a while, when there's a cool series, I will binge watch. So I'm a hybrid. So this feeling of angst that you see is very familiar to us in the post industry, right? Post is filled with angst and pain points. To me, this is a real email that I snatched from our scheduler coordinator because binge watching equals binge delivery. That's the big dynamic over the last couple of years. And even though ABC is not Netflix, traditional broadcasters now are getting entire seasons delivered within a few weeks. And I can tell you from our perspective, being a small, medium post house, that we've never seen that before. And now it happens routinely with the Turners of the world, the CBS, not so much of the CBSs, but the ABCs, Turners, and other traditional broadcasters. And it's kind of like iterating on a 13 to 24-hour movie, right? That's an entire season. And the creatives, right, with the leverage that they have, are iterating creatively across 10 episodes if it's a 10-episode season, or 13 episodes if it's a 13-episode season. And that is really complex if you think about it, because it used to be that you shoot a show, you post it, and you air it, and move on to the next one in some kind of logical fashion. So now we routinely will be iterating across the visual effects department, color department, conform department, as well as the creative editorial, all churning away, but they're almost like randomly jumping from like episode 1 to episode 9, right? And that's a new behavioral component that we have had to resolve, right? One of the ways we do that is we store all of the camera negative on object storage so that the client has access to their entire pool of raw media, right? No penalty, no harm. The idea of doing that from an LTO workflow, which is very common nowadays, where you retrieve elements as you do a reconform or do something in the finishing, is not sustainable with the current schedules. So that's one thing that helped resolve a huge pain point, which is just make the whole thing readily available across all departments. For that matter, we've been really diligent to work with other post houses, right? I call this the era of co-opetition, right? It used to be that, hey, you're a post house, I'm a post house, like we can't actually hang out, right? Certainly we can't share information. That's unheard of. So we're starting to see that thaw, right? So like if we're providing this open-ended object storage, we now routinely, with certain companies, grant them secure access to the camera raw so they can just grab what they need, right? That's hyper efficient compared to clip pulls, where someone is taking a clip out or an assistant editor is lining up a bunch of clips and then they send them off to the vendor, and invariably you're missing a few frames. It's an inefficient process that goes around and around. So we essentially eliminated that problem just by making everything available. And you know, that's related to this cloud thing, but I'm not going to use the word cloud. I'm not going to use the word cloud. So all it is a server somewhere, right? It's a server in your facility, or it's a public server, like an AWS or Google Cloud Platform or Azure or small providers like DigitalOcean. It's just that. That's all it is. And I think right now there's a lot of ambiguity about what cloud is, just like there's a lot of ambiguity about what blockchain is. Don't get me started on that. But honestly, we dig blockchain and we dig the C word too. So post is high anxiety, pain points all around. And another curious development is the notion of post scheduling has all but disappeared, right? We were used to in the past for things to be scheduled, to be somewhat organized in terms of scripted television in particular. And right now the dynamic is more on demand, right? I want this now. This has to happen now. Someone has to see this, someone has to see that. So in a sense, it's almost like it's become organized chaos. And from talking with my colleagues at other post houses, we're not unique in that. Other people are seeing the same thing. So again, binge watching equals binge delivery. So the golden age of TV is also the golden age of NLE. When we were born, right, it was about, you know, revolutions, and Avid cost over $100,000, and I had to, you know, beg and cheat to, you know, get in front of one to work on my creative project after hours when the Avid editor wasn't there. So there was a certain kind of motivation back then, but today it's really different. We today have the most accomplished NLEs in human history, all at the same time. It's remarkable. And it's not really a fight or a revolution anymore. It's about which tool is best for you. And I just had to call that out because I remember what it was like back then. Speaking of which, this is what it was like back then. So we essentially started with Apple. And early on, they decided to either acquire or build additional pro apps, right? Everybody remembers the pro apps, right? Or hold on, who remembers the pro apps? Okay, it's about half the audience. So back in the day, Apple created Color and Logic and Shake, where they bought Film Logic, which became Cinema Tools, which helped you track the little key numbers on the side of your film, which is what allowed you to cut something digitally and then cut the physical asset, which is a perilous job because if you screwed up, it's game over. You're out. So digital, of course, was amazing because it was non-destructive. You can make errors until the cows come home, but you're not fired per se. The one thing about this development is the way Apple approached the Pro apps is that every Pro app was a different team with a different product manager, right? And through XML and other ways, you would round trip from Final Cut to another application, right? And that worked relatively well. But I also remember back then, sometimes you would get stuck, right, with one of the apps, especially if you're using all of them, as we were. So when we got to Final Cut 7, you know, that was an amazing time. And then Final Cut 10 came. And at that point in time, we were primarily working with union editors, people working on scripted TV, feature films. And for whatever reason, the union editors didn't take the Final Cut 10. So we found ourselves training our Final Cut people, some of them are still here to this day, Avid, which was really odd. But we did it. We learned Avid and continued business operation, working on the type of shows we do. But almost imperceptibly over the last 3-4 years, we've transitioned holistically to Resolve, right? So we've been on a crazy-ass journey. And it's amazing that Final Cut Pro is now 20 years old, and if you guys missed it, Randy Ubios was here at the last meeting or the meeting before, Michael? The June meeting, and that was really amazing because he went through his process of how he actually created Final Cut. So if you guys haven't seen that, you should see that, because I didn't know a lot of how Final Cut came to be. And this is after he had created Premiere. So it all started with DV, that cute little tape, right? That was our revolution. Firewire, to me, was the beginning of the digital revolution in media and entertainment, right? And these were the tools. This is my apartment where we did a test, as I mentioned before, and somehow we mimicked what a $100,000 Avid does. And this was my day job back in 1993, so that's a telecine machine. It was at a negative cutting house, and again, it was a brain damage type of environment. It's just pure toxins when you walk in because they're gluing the film together, they're cutting it. It's just sitting raw on the shelves. And you know, I attribute all of my deficiencies to that work experience. The DaVinci, the DaVinci systems, that's what it was called. Resolve did not exist at that time. That was like a over $1 million system, right? And it was used to scan film 1 frame at a time, to videotape like 3/4 beta SP, digital beta, right? When I started, HD cam was still not there. And that was the linear global workflow for the media and entertainment industry. It didn't really waver even from country to country. It was a linear workflow. It was physical. You had to handle it. And that goes all the way back to production. When you took the film out of the film magazine and you changed it in that bag, that was also a perilous job to have. But that's where we came from. I have to call out this guy. He still works there at DaVinci. It's Dwayne. If you guys ever see Dwayne, just give him a big hug. He'll totally dig it. He helped us figure out how to transfer the Quadra machine, the film machine, how we got that signal to a Sony DV cam deck, if you guys remember those, with the first ever implementation of SDI. So that's how we got the film to the cute little tape. And that's how we got it into Final Cut, and through Firewire mimicked the whole process. So I give Dwayne a lot of credit, and it's remarkable. He's still working there. Now he'll help you build a Linux system, right? But it's still the same Dwayne that helped us way back when. Some quick historical timelines. So DaVinci Renaissance, 1992, right? Arguably the world's #1 finishing system for film. 1993, that's when I started working on it. You had DaVinci 2K and 2K Plus. These were premium options that you could order for your facility. There was also a machine called the Time Logic Controller, which ganged together all the decks and the telecine machine. So when you hit control record, you can hear the tape machines go back 5 seconds, click, 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 click. And sometimes you can tell one deck didn't go back. You could always tell, and you're like, oh shit, there's a client there. Hardware issues, right? And it would land it on the exact, mark-in, right? And that's how we transferred clips one by one to videotape. 2005 is the first appearance of Resolve, right, at NAB. And I remember that. And honestly, when I saw it, I thought it was lame. I didn't get it. Because, actually, this is the first, this is from Peter Chamberlain, gave me this picture and these statistics. This is the first ever DaVinci Resolve that was shown in 2005 at a Beijing trade show, okay? And look at what it was. HD resolution, a whopping 1.7 terabytes of storage, 12 computers to operate that bad boy. And it's really noteworthy that it took 5 PCs just for panning, pan and scanning, essentially. So that took a lot of resources back then. By 2006, approximately 1 year later, that was condensed to 4 PCs. And in 2008, we hear a lot about GPUs now, but that was the beginning right there, this notion that GPU is relevant to a finishing system. But that's when this GPU idea started entering our consciousness. So meanwhile, while all that was going on, we were using Final Cut to color TV shows. The idea of software-defined color correction, right? And it was generally a disaster. I mean, we got no support. Everyone thought it was a dumb idea. Like, you're using a computer? Really? That's stupid. Why would you do that? It was something that we did just because it was there, and we saw the potential. I remember the early days were just actually failure on failure, right? But we persisted, and we ended up actually coloring real TV shows on Final Cut because the clients didn't care. That's what it took. As long as we delivered the show, right, with a broadcast safe QC, right, then they were fine. We even used Premiere. We colored a really cool documentary called Dust to Glory, which used, I think, well over 200 cameras across this 1,000-mile off-road race. And what's that? 60 cameras. You know about it. Cool. And I remember our colorist, Henry Santos, coloring this show with a mouse. And he has, to this day, carpal tunnel syndrome as a result. But we did it, and that was an achievement, and we didn't get any attention or anything. It was just the fact that we can use a software application to do professional color correction. Then this thing came along, this fellow named Roland, and he started a company called Final Touch, and then we used that to do shows like Everybody Hates Chris and other TV shows. And again, it was more challenging than not, but we were scrappy and we persisted, and we got the actual episodes done week in, week out. And then Apple bought Final Touch, and it became Apple's Color. I think we were the first company to use Apple's Color on actual TV shows, including Weeds, Sarah Silverman Show, and NCIS Los Angeles Season 1. Speaking of which, do you guys want to take a guess at how much the first Resolve software cost? No. No. You guys, it's funny, you're on both sides of the continuum, because remember the hardware DaVinci Systems was easily 1 million plus. So this is their first foray in a software version of DaVinci. So what do you think they priced it? Really close. So I'll give it to you. It was 600,000. Yeah. So they basically, in their wisdom, and again, this is not black magic design. This is DaVinci system. This is DaVinci Systems from Florida, based out of Florida. And they said, hey, let's just do something that's compelling. So we're going to put the price in half. Well, DaVinci starts on this path to evolve themselves into a software company. However, they started way too late. And I remember, because I had a relationship with DaVinci Systems, and I know that they were struggling, and they didn't make it. Just like Kodak, right? So I think if you look at that original company, it had a lot of the same characteristics as Kodak, but they went bankrupt. And Mr. Grant Petty, Blackmagic Design, bought them, right? And the rest is history. So that was in September 2009, after the company assets were liquidated. And then shortly thereafter, November 2009, Resolve 6.3 with the dongle, still a dongle, right? And then the users supply their own hardware. It was Linux only when it came out. Then Grant did what he does, which is, okay, it costs $15 million, so we're going to charge $9.99, right? And I think the initial reaction was like, huh? Like, because consider that the user base for DaVinci, do you guys want to take a guess at how many global users DaVinci Systems had?
Less than 36.
That's right. No. Oh, sorry. You know what? I'm such an idiot because I also have it on my notes. So yeah, isn't that crazy? They had less than 100 customers. Holy crap. So when Grant comes out, the only people who knew what it was, there was only 100 people around. Everyone didn't know what it was. So the initial reaction was, huh? Is that important?
Grant must have got a good deal on it too, right?
Yes. Fire sale comes to mind.
That was around 2010 when there was less than 100.
Yes, that's correct. It's crazy. The backdrop to Resolve is a really fascinating story. And we just happened to be there, right? But we were the Final Cut Pro house. But all along, this thing was brewing in the background. So as Resolve was up and coming, we were 100% in the Final Cut camp, 100%. But this was happening. And then one of our colorists, Patrick Woodard, who wasn't particularly fond of Final Touch or Apple's Color, he used it at the highest levels. In fact, he was probably the first human to use it on TV shows, on scripted TV shows. And when he found out about this, and we already had a relationship with Blackmagic, with Grant and the team, he literally, and he did this without even telling us, he just switched, like mid-season, which is not recommendable, right? It's not the brightest idea ever. And this show in particular, to this day, is a traditional show. We have a little narrow window to get every episode, every 44-minute episode done. It has no less than 200 visual effects and a really demanding schedule, but Patrick is just wired that way. So mid-season, we transitioned from Apple's Color to DaVinci Resolve the same year that Blackmagic purchased them. And it's been amazing. It's just like Final Cut Pro, it was working out all manner of workflow considerations. The fact that DaVinci Resolve never even considered the notion of scripted TV or scripted TV workflow. So it was a rough start, right? And the one thing I will call out about the Resolve team is I think they've gotten more done in a finishing application than any finishing application in the history of finishing applications. Yeah. We've encountered every software that we're aware of, and we've never seen anything like this. The velocity of development is something really unusual, something special. So the first thing we did is just download like everything that was missing. Because again, if you're doing a feature film, if you're doing a documentary, if you're doing a reality, if you're doing a music video, all of those projects have their own nuance. They have their own workflow, right? And they have their own cultures, even political, right? Non-technical stuff that you have to deal with, where the application saves your life, right? Not technical considerations, just the social and political implications of working in all these different genres. And God help you if you work across multiple genres, because that means you have to assimilate all that complexity. So, so in any case, our proving ground was NCIS Los Angeles Season 2, and we survived that. So these are some images that come to mind when I think of black magic design. You know, they're kind of like dominating. It's like, black magic, please have mercy on us. The one interesting thing about black magic, if you didn't know, is